Hi guys and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I will share with you the best plane designs you can use in Hearts of Iron 4 in 2025. We are going to check small airframes, which are the most balanced and most useful overall, medium airframes, which are more range-oriented, and large airframes for strategic bombing. If that sounds interesting, then this is the right video for you. Of course, if you have been enjoying the content I make, please do not forget to support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, and leaving a comment. It really helps. We have a lot of designs to check, so let's start right away with the most useful ones. Now the F1 is likely the first fighter that you will be able to make. There isn't much choice here, we only have light machine guns. We're using a turret to increase slightly the air attack and air defense, and the drop tanks to increase range a little bit. Things, however, get a bit more interesting if you have access to cannons from the very beginning of the game. Some countries do, like Germany and the Soviet Union, and if that's the case, then you can opt for this more offensive variant. It has less range, but it has significantly more air attack compared to the default F1. When it comes to CAS, I have three variants for you. This is the default one. It is cheap, has overall balanced stats, and it can also be used as a naval bomber, which can be very useful. I also made a range-oriented version, this one, which uses the extra fuel tanks. Finally, we have a more offensive version, this one using small bomb bays instead of bomb blocks. This one is more offensive in the sense that you get the maximum amount of ground attack you can get this early in the game, but you cannot use it as a naval bomber. So depending on your needs, you can choose one of the three designs to use early in the game. Now if you do want a dedicated naval bomber, I would go for this very basic design. Just remember to use the floats to increase the surface detection, and then upgrade, as you unlock further technologies, the torpedoes. And this is an even more basic but extremely effective design that you can use on your carriers. 1939 is when things get interesting, because you can get these much better designs. You should upgrade your F1 to this F2 design as soon as possible, as this one is massively better in all aspects. Now its stats are so good that this will absolutely destroy the AI-made planes, and it can safely be used for the rest of your run. Now if you really lack the rubber for the self-sealing fuel tanks, which are indeed a bit rubber heavy, you can make this cheaper version instead. It is very similar, but it doesn't use the self-sealing fuel tanks, and we use the drop tanks instead, so it has a bit less range and slightly less air defense. In my opinion, the rubber investment is always worth it when you can afford it, so whenever possible you should try to make this design. This is possibly the best fighter design in the game. In terms of CAS, you also want to upgrade your CAS to this C2 design as soon as possible. This is also massively better. You get very good ground attack, and you also get pretty decent naval targeting and naval attack, so you can use it as a naval bomber as well. It is incredibly flexible, however it does require an extra technology for the heavy bomb blocks. If you don't have that, you can use either regular bomb blocks or small bomb bays. Bomb bays will have the same ground attack, slightly more expensive. Bomb blocks, less ground attack, but more naval attack. So depending on what you need, choose between the two. And now, if I have to be completely honest with you guys, you don't really need the rest of this video, because these are all the designs you need. With this C2 and this F2, you really don't need anything else. For the rest of your run, you can safely keep making these fighters, discuss, and destroy your opponents. However, of course, if you do want to upgrade, I have some designs for you. First of all, let's take a look at the upgrade to advanced small airframes. So this upgrade is, in my opinion, not particularly worth it. You can keep a design which is very similar like this one, or you could use the large cannons instead and remove one of the modules down here, maybe the self-sealing fuel tanks, for more air attack. Overall, yes, this fighter is better than the previous one, but it is also more expensive, and overall not very much worth the upgrade. More or less the same thing can be said about the C3. It has better stats, but it is more expensive, not particularly worth the upgrade. Of course, if you have nothing else to do, you can go for it, but the thing is, usually your researches are better spent on something else, rather than the advanced airframes, or engines, so you don't really need to upgrade to this one. That's even more the case when it comes to the F4 and C4 designs. This is the F4 design. Of course it has good stats, but again it's more expensive, not particularly worth the upgrade. The C4 is particularly not worth it. It's very expensive, but at this point of the run, usually this late into the game, I thought you don't really care about the production cost, and so I just tried to maximize as much as possible the ground attack. So you get almost 60 ground attack. That's pretty good. but again, not necessary if you have a very good C2 design like we do. If there is one upgrade that is worth getting, is likely the Supersonic small airframe. Now this is unlocked through a special project and you can get it only very late into the game. But its stats, all of the stats are absolutely insane. Look at the speed and range paired with this air attack, agility, air defense. It's just an insane fighter which will destroy everything the eye throws at it. And with this, we can move on to medium airframes. Now, before we take a look at these MF1, which you can make in 1936, let me say a couple of things about heavy fighters in general. Heavy fighters are actually not bad. They are more expensive than small airframes, but they also offer better stats and significantly more range. So they could be a great choice if you fight in areas in which range is a problem. As long as you are fighting in Europe, that's usually not the case, so you don't usually need heavy fighters. But for example, in the Pacific, they could play a much more important role. Now for this MF1, I left most of the modules down here free, and that's for you to choose depending on the situation. So you could add some extra range, making the range of this plane absolutely insane, but you could take full advantage of that, or you could go in with defensive turrets, add more defensive turrets to boost the air defense and air attack. I must say though that the default module, this one empty, it's fairly cheap and quite balanced. Now when looking at CAS, we encounter one of the main issues with medium airframes. And that is that they are not made for CAS. So in theory, even if you go for heavy fighters, you should still research the small airframes for your CAS. However, if you do want to stick to medium airframes, have the same range on your CAS and on your fighters, you can make tactical bombers instead, like this one. Now they are not as effective as CAS, but they are quite flexible, as they can perform several different missions. As you can see, they can perform CAS missions, but also strategic bombing, naval strike, port strike, and logistics strike. Now, not all of these missions are really useful, but having flexibility is always a good thing. Once again, in 1939 you can get some serious upgrades, and you should as soon as possible upgrade to these designs. This is the MF2, which you can get in 1939, which is superior to the MF1 in all aspects and always worth the upgrade. Again, down here I left the self-sealing fuel tanks, which in my opinion are worth it, but you also have a few free modules here for extra range or turrets, depending on your needs. For tactical bombers, the upgrade is not as great, but you can go for this MC2 design for better overall stats. Later in the game, you can actually get a very good upgrade for the heavy fighter. This is a very solid design, and one of the advantages in this case with heavy fighters is that usually jet engines limit so much your range that they are not worth it, but in this case you can get very good range, very good speed, and incredibly balanced air defense, attack and agility, so this is a very, very solid design. The MC3 is a much more straightforward upgrade, but one that is unlikely worth it, so much that I didn't even design an MC4 version. I did make an MF4 design, this one, and this actually gets some very good stats, but probably not enough to be worth the upgrade from the very solid MF3 design I showed earlier. Alright, we only have a quick last series of planes to check, as we are going to cover large airframes. They are probably the least used, as large airframes only have one purpose, and that is strategic bombing. And unfortunately, strategic bombing, while it can be useful in multiplayer, in single player is not really great. Destroying the enemy provinces is not particularly useful because usually in single player you advance quite fast, you occupy those territories, so when you are strategic bombing, you're basically bombing yourself. Still, if you do want to make strategic bombers, I would recommend using these two designs that I'm about to show you. This one for the early game, this can be achieved fairly early in the game, and it has very good strategic bombing. And then later on you can upgrade it to this one for the mid and late game, and consider that we are using the same airframe, the basic large airframe, so you can refit the ones you already have. And in my opinion, this is actually more than you will ever need in terms of strategic bombers, but I also decided to make a 1, 2, 3, 4 version like I did for the other designs. So we would start with this very basic SB1 right at the beginning of the game. You can later upgrade to this SB2 design in 1939. We then have this SB3 design around 1943. Incredible strategic bombing, as you can see there. And then the last one is really just for fun. Look at how crazy this looks. But one thing I want to say about this, of course it's not worth making, look at the production cost, but also look at the naval attack on port strike. Almost 100 naval attack. This can probably wipe entire navies while they are in the enemy ports. It could be fun to use, but still, I would definitely not make this plane. And this was the last design I had for you. So that's really all for today. Of course, guys, as usual, if you enjoyed the video, please do not forget to support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, and leaving me a comment. Let me know what you thought about these plane designs, and if you have any suggestions for further improvements. Also, I'm very curious, do you use heavy fighters? And what about strategic and tactical bombers? Make sure to let me know in the comments. Other than that, if you stayed with me until now, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys very soon in the next video. Bye bye!